Have you ever poured your heart into someone only to watch them laugh at it like it was a joke? What if the gift you spent years preparing, the one meant to change their life, was mocked in front of everyone you thought was family? This is the story of a man who gave everything, stayed through silence, and then, when the moment came, took it all back, not out of revenge, but out of something far more powerful. Stay with me, because by the end of this story you might just question what love really means, and who actually deserves yours. That I had never imagined that a single moment, just a few seconds long, could unravel years of love, sacrifice, and unspoken devotion in such a quiet, cruel way. That Christmas evening, sitting in my sister's overly decorated living room, blinking through the flashing lights and muffled laughter, I watched the center of my world hold the gift I had poured myself into, and laugh. It was the kind of laugh that doesn't just sting, it hollows you out. I can still hear it in my head, sharp, dismissive, layered with sarcasm, like I had handed her a crumpled napkin instead of something sacred. She laughed, and then my sister joined in, waving her wine glass in amusement, as if the whole moment was nothing more than a forgettable comedy bit. I didn't say a word. I just sat there, my hands clasped in my lap, watching the journal get tossed aside like it didn't contain years of memories, hopes, and sacrifices hidden between its pages. It had taken me weeks to assemble. Each page held something intimate, a photograph of us from her kindergarten graduation where she'd held my hand tighter than her mother's, a note I'd written when she aced her math test in 6th grade, ticket stubs from our little movie nights when I was the only one who showed up, and at the very end, an envelope. A check for $42,500. The money I had saved silently over the past 9 years. Every overtime shift, every missed vacation, every meal I skipped when my grocery budget was tight. It was my gift for her future. For college. For the life I never got to have. But none of that mattered in that moment. What they saw was a tacky scrapbook, in my sister's words. Sweet but cheap, my niece had said, giggling as her cousins leaned in for a look. Did you seriously make this yourself? She added, like I was some kind of pitiful joke. And I just nodded, my heart pounding, my throat closing in, my entire body screaming to run. But I sat still. That kind of pain isn't loud. It's not the kind that gets dramatic music in a movie scene. It's quiet, humiliating, the kind of pain that creeps into your bones and settles there. That night I drove home without saying goodbye. I didn't cry, I think I was too numb for that, but my hands shook on the steering wheel the whole ride back. I kept replaying the moment again and again. What did I do wrong? Was it really so laughable to give something handmade? Had I misjudged who she was all along? But deep down it wasn't just about the gift. It was about being unseen. After all these years they still didn't see me, not truly. They didn't see the way I gave up my 20s to help raise her when her father walked out. They didn't see the late nights I spent reading college forums to understand how to apply for scholarships on her behalf, or the countless school meetings I attended when my sister had other things to do. They didn't see me spend Christmases alone, because I was working extra hours to afford her summer programs. To them I was just Uncle Jake. Funny, dependable, always there to fix things, but never quite worthy of real gratitude. And the worst part? I had been okay with that. I never expected grand gestures of thanks. A smile, a hug, a simple "this means a lot to me" would have been enough. But instead I got laughter. I got mocked. And suddenly all the years I had spent quietly loving them felt like a cruel joke. That night I took the college check out of my account and canceled the financial authorization I had set up for her tuition. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because I realized that love given without value becomes invisible. And I wasn't going to keep giving parts of myself to people who only ever saw what I lacked, never what I gave. As I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the crumpled wrapping paper I had saved like some sentimental fool, I thought back to when it all began. When my niece, Lily, was born, I had been 24, just out of community college, working my first steady job as a mechanic. My sister, Dana, had shown up at my doorstep crying, holding a newborn and already drowning in debt. Her husband had taken off 2 weeks after the birth. Mom and Dad were gone and I had no one but them. I took them in without question. For the first few years, it felt like we were a team. Dana worked odd jobs, I worked full-time, and between us we kept Lily fed and clothed. I'd come home tired and sore, but Lily's giggles would wash away every ache. She called me Dada for the first year, and even when Dana corrected her, I felt something in my heart shift. I never had kids of my own and I never minded. Lily was mine in all the ways that mattered. I remember one night when she was 4 and had a nightmare. She crawled into my bed, clutching her blanket, and whispered, "Don't let the dark take me, Uncle Jake." That night, I held her until she fell asleep, and I promised myself I would always protect her. No matter what. But promises made in the dark sometimes die in the daylight. As Dana's life stabilized and she found better jobs, she started pulling away from me. Emotionally, financially, even physically. She moved into a nicer neighborhood, put Lily in a private school, and stopped inviting me to school events. She said it was time for Lily to be with kids of her class. I never said it out loud, but that line cut deeper than most. So I kept supporting. I sent money when the tuition got tight. I sent books, helped with essays, even bought her a laptop she claimed came from Mom when she posted about it online. And I let it all slide. Because love is supposed to be selfless, right? But selflessness starts to rot when it's never reciprocated. I guess the saddest part is that I thought this Christmas would change things. It was her last one before college. I thought maybe this time she'd open the journal, read the words I wrote, and finally see me, not as the cheap uncle who couldn't buy designer gifts, but as the man who had loved her so fully and so quietly, it became a part of her every day. But no. I was just the fool with the homemade book. And as I stared at the envelope now sitting in my locked drawer instead of her hands, I realized that maybe it wasn't just her who changed. Maybe I had too. Maybe I had finally reached the end of my ability to give without being seen. Maybe love wasn't about sacrifice. It was about recognition. And without it, love withers. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if Lily would ever understand what she had lost. But I knew one thing for certain. That was the last gift I would ever give without knowing it was truly wanted. I had no idea then how deep the consequences of that Christmas would run, or how one simple silent act of retraction would shake the entire foundation of our family. But in that moment, as I sat alone in the quiet journal still warm from her hands, I made a promise. Not to her, not to Dana, but to myself. No more invisible giving. No more quiet sacrifices that end in laughter. From now on, if I gave love, it would be to those who could hold it gently, not mock it for sport. That was the night Uncle Jake died in the eyes of a family who never really knew him, and a different man began to rise. One who would no longer be the joke at the holiday table, but the storm they never saw coming. You don't wake up one morning and decide to become someone's parent. It's something that happens in the quiet in-between spaces of life, in the small sacrifices that don't feel like much at the time but eventually shape who you are. I never intended to step into the role of a father. I didn't even think I was capable of it. I was 24, just learning how to survive on my own, and barely keeping my head above water with a job that left my body sore and my mind numb. But the day Dana stood at my door, soaked from the rain, holding a newborn wrapped in a hospital blanket with red eyes and a broken heart, something shifted in me. I didn't ask questions. I didn't hesitate. I just moved aside and let them in. At the time, I didn't see it as noble or brave. I just saw it as necessary. They had nowhere else to go. Her husband, Nate, had walked out 2 weeks after Lily was born, left a note on the kitchen counter that read, "I'm not built for this," and disappeared into whatever corner of the world cowards run to. Dana was shattered. She'd always been the louder one, the stronger one, the one who knew how to take up space in a room. But that night she was small. Her voice barely a whisper. I made her tea, helped her into bed, and held Lily while she slept. And as I stared down at this tiny warm human with fists balled up and lips twitching in dreams, I felt something I had never known before. It wasn't just love. It was responsibility. That night turned into a week. A week turned into months. And before I knew it, I was doing late-night feedings, diaper changes, singing lullabies I didn't know I remembered, and juggling my shifts at the garage with midnight rocking sessions. Dana tried. She got a part-time job and promised to save. But the truth is she was drowning. Postpartum depression crept in like a shadow, and there were days she didn't get out of bed. So I stepped in. I did it because someone had to. But more than that, I did it because Lily needed someone who wouldn't leave. In those early years we built a rhythm. I'd work all day, come home, and Dana would pass Lily off to me like a baton in a relay race. I'd bathe her, feed her, sing her to sleep. Her first word was, "up," but the second was, "Jakey." I cried the first time she said it. I don't think Dana ever knew that. The thing about being the stand-in parent is that no one tells you where the lines are. There were birthdays where I baked the cake. Christmases where I built bikes from scratch late into the night. Parent-teacher meetings where the teacher assumed I was the father and I never corrected them. I paid for school uniforms, for piano lessons, for art classes she loved for exactly 3 weeks before moving on. I was there for every scraped knee, every bedtime story, every tear after a bad day. I was there and I gave without question. But I was never the parent. Not officially. I didn't get the titles, the cards on Father's Day, or the seat next to her during school plays. That spot was reserved, for a ghost apparently. Dana made it clear that I was Uncle Jake. Helpful, yes. Supportive, sure. But not a parent. That role was sacred, even if the man who once held it had long since vanished. I think that's what stung the most, not just being denied the title but being constantly reminded of my place. I remember one day when Lily was about 9. She had made a drawing in school for someone who helped her the most. It was me standing next to her holding her hand. But when she presented it at school, Dana stood up and smiled for the camera. She took the drawing, thanked the teacher, and when we got home she tucked it away in a box labeled Memories. I wasn't even mentioned. I didn't say anything. I just went to my room and sat in the dark for a while. It was a pattern that repeated over the years. I did the work, took the emotional weight, but never got the recognition. When Lily got into her first honors class in 7th grade, I was the one who stayed up nights tutoring her through pre-algebra. But at the family dinner, Dana raised a toast to herself for raising such a brilliant girl on her own. I smiled. I clinked my glass. I swallowed the bitterness like medicine. It was around that time I started the college fund. I opened an account in my name and began siphoning a portion of every paycheck into it. It wasn't much at first, just 100 here, 200 there. But it grew. I skipped movies, new clothes, even car repairs I really needed. Every dollar I saved felt like a promise. That one day she would go further than any of us did. That one day maybe she'd understand. But that understanding never came. As she got older, Lily changed. She stopped coming to the garage after school. She stopped asking for help with homework. Her clothes changed, her friends changed, and so did her attitude. I chalked it up to teenage years at first, the usual distance that comes with growing up. But deep down I felt something shift. The warmth that used to light up her face when she saw me started to dim. She began to roll her eyes at my jokes, brush off my advice, and correct me in ways that felt less about growth and more about superiority. And Dana didn't help. She encouraged it in subtle, passive ways. "You don't have to listen to your uncle's old man lectures," she'd say with a smirk. "He means well, but he's a little out of touch." It was like she was slowly erasing me from Lily's world, bit by bit, smile by smile. I tried to hold on. I wrote her letters, left notes in her lunchbox even when I wasn't sure she still read them. I asked about her day, her classes, her dreams. But the answers got shorter. The tone colder. And still I gave. Till I saved. Because that's what love looks like, right? It's not grand declarations. It's consistency. It's showing up. It's staying. And I stayed. Through birthdays I wasn't invited to plan. Through school dances I wasn't asked to photograph. Through milestones where I stood in the back, clapping silently. I stayed because I believed that one day it would matter. That one day she would look back and see that it was me. Not Dana, not Nate, not some boyfriend or teacher. But me who had been the constant. But the truth is, love without recognition isn't enough. You can give someone the world, but if they never look up to see who's holding it, you start to disappear. I started to disappear. Slowly. Quietly. Until all that was left of me was the role I played. The dependable uncle. The helper. The ghost in the background. That Christmas when I handed her the journal, I think some part of me hoped it would be the thing that turned the tide. That maybe she would read the notes, see the photos, feel the love behind each page and remember. Remember the man who stayed. But she didn't. She laughed. And in that laughter, I heard every unspoken dismissal, every time she forgot to say thank you, every time she walked past me like I was part of the furniture. It was a moment years in the making. And in that moment I saw the truth, not just about her but about myself. I had spent nearly 2 decades trying to be a father in every way but name, hoping that love alone would make it real. But names matter. Acknowledgement matters. And I had been invisible for too long. That night, as I sat in my apartment surrounded by silence, I didn't just mourn a ruined Christmas. I mourned the version of myself who believed that love without validation was enough. Because it's not. Not really. Not when the people you love the most can't even see you standing there with your heart in your hands, asking for nothing but a little gratitude. I wasn't just the uncle. I had been so much more. But in their eyes I was never quite enough. And maybe it was time I stopped trying to be. There's a particular kind of heartbreak that doesn't come from betrayal or cruelty, but from watching someone you love slowly become someone you don't recognize. That's what it felt like with Lily. Not a sudden break, not a screaming match, not a single moment where it all fell apart, but a slow unraveling. Like a favorite sweater you've worn for years, only to notice one day that the threads have come loose, the color has faded, and the fabric no longer warms you the way it used to. That was Lily. My Lily. The wide-eyed, messy-haired girl who used to dance on my boots in the garage while I worked, who used to fall asleep with her head on my chest while I read her bedtime stories in my scratchy mechanic's voice, who used to say, "You're my favorite grown-up, Uncle Jake." I held on to those memories like a lifeline, especially as the years passed and the girl I knew slowly gave way to a stranger with perfect eyebrows, sarcastic comebacks, and earbuds that rarely left her ears. At first I told myself it was normal. Teenagers go through phases. They pull away, find their independence, become sullen and private and unrecognizable. But there was something sharper in Lily's shift. Something that felt less like growing up and more like turning away. I remember one afternoon when she was 14. She came home from school with a sour look on her face and tossed her backpack on the floor. I asked her about her day and she replied with a single word, "Fine." I tried to push a little, offered to make her a snack, remind her I was there if she wanted to talk. She rolled her eyes, muttered something about me trying too hard, and stormed into her room. I stood in the hallway holding a plate of cut-up apples with peanut butter and cinnamon the way she used to like them, and suddenly felt like an intruder in my own home. It wasn't just the silence, it was the indifference. That's what hurt the most. Not anger. Not rebellion. Just the sense that I no longer mattered. Dana didn't help. If anything, she fueled the growing distance. She'd scoff when I asked about Lily's schoolwork, telling me to let her have space. She rolled her eyes when I reminded Lily to say thank you for things. "She doesn't have to perform gratitude for every little thing, Jake," she once snapped. "You're not her father." That line. That cursed line. It haunted every corner of our home. I wasn't her father. I knew that. I never claimed the title. But wasn't I something? Didn't those years of wiping tears and fixing broken science projects and attending school meetings count for anything? Apparently not. The more Dana leaned into her role as the single independent mother, the more she erased the quiet constancy I offered. I wasn't the provider anymore. I was the backup plan. The babysitter. The man who helped but didn't belong. And Lily, consciously or not, mirrored that energy. She stopped coming to the garage altogether. She stopped asking for advice. She stopped acknowledging the small ways I tried to stay connected. I remember one Christmas, maybe 2 years before the one that broke everything. I got her a sketch pad and some professional charcoal pencils because she used to love drawing. I even got her name embossed on the leather cover. When she opened it, she smiled politely, said thanks, and then posted a picture online with the caption, "My mom always knows what I need." Dana never corrected it. Never even looked in my direction. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and sipped my coffee and swallowed that same bitter medicine I'd been choking down for years. I wish I could say that was the worst of it, but it wasn't. There was a moment, a singular, searing moment, that made me realize just how far gone she was. It was during her junior year of high school. She was applying to summer college prep programs, and I had spent hours helping her research, edit essays, and prepare her applications. One evening, I overheard her on the phone with a friend, gushing about how her mom is doing everything to help her get into the right program. I sat there on the couch, the cursor blinking on the laptop where I had just finished polishing her personal statement. She never mentioned me. Not once. Not even a we. Just, my mom. That was when it hit me. She had rewritten her story. In her version, I was background noise. A shadow. A filler. And as painful as that realization was, what made it worse was knowing I couldn't do anything to change it. Love isn't a performance. It's not something you can wave in someone's face and demand recognition for. It either roots itself in someone's heart, or it doesn't. And with Lily, I had to face the devastating truth that my love hadn't taken root. Not the way I hoped. Not the way I believed it had. I kept telling myself it would turn around. That maybe once she got older, once she saw the world for what it really was, she'd look back and realize what I had been. That she'd pick up the phone and say, "I get it now. Thank you." But even as I held on to that hope, a part of me began to brace for the possibility that it would never come. And still I gave. Still I saved. I worked Saturdays. I skipped new tires on my truck and delayed doctor appointments. I clipped coupons. I budgeted. I built that college fund like it was a monument to the love I had poured into her life. Brick by brick, dollar by dollar, sacrifice by sacrifice. It wasn't about the money. It was about what it represented. The future. A legacy. A silent testament to a love that had been ignored but never wavered. And then came Christmas. The journal. The laughter. I had convinced myself that it would be the turning point. That all those years of being invisible would finally give way to a moment of clarity. That she would open the journal, read the letters, see the photos, feel the care, and remember. Remember me. The me who sang her to sleep. The me who braided her hair when Dana was too busy. The me who stood in the rain for 3 hours outside her piano recital because I didn't have a ticket, but didn't want to miss hearing her play. But instead she laughed. She laughed. And in that laugh I heard every moment she had forgotten. Every piece of me she had shed in favor of a more curated, polished life. A life where Uncle Jake was an afterthought. And maybe that was the most painful part of all. Not that she mocked the gift, but that the gift didn't even register as meaningful. It was just a weird scrapbook, as she called it. It wasn't a culmination of years. It was a joke. Something to laugh about over drinks with her cousins. That night I didn't just take back the money, I took back the illusion. The illusion that love alone was enough. That being there would eventually count for something. I had given her my best years. And she had forgotten me. Completely. Utterly. Like I had never really mattered. And that truth sat heavier in my chest than any heartbreak I'd ever known. That I had spent weeks planning that gift. Maybe months if I count the hours I lost just sitting at the edge of my bed thinking about how to make it perfect. I didn't have the money for a MacBook or one of those luxury travel vouchers her cousins always bragged about, but I had something else. Memories. Moments. Pieces of a history she seemed to have forgotten but that I carried around like prayer beads. I had this old leather-bound journal I'd kept in my closet for years, waiting for the right moment, the right person. And Lily was the only person who had ever made me feel like that journal could mean something. So I began filling it. Not with quotes or fluff but with the essence of us. Me and her, the way we used to be. On the first page I glued a photo from her second birthday. She had cake smeared on her cheeks and was sitting on my lap, both hands raised in the air like she was conducting a symphony of joy. I remember that day vividly. Dana had been too tired to bake a cake, so I stayed up all night making one from a boxed mix and decorated it with purple frosting because Lily had gone through a purple is magical phase. That cake collapsed halfway, but Lily clapped and told me it was a mountain cake, and declared it perfect. I wrote that memory beneath the photo in pen, my handwriting a little shaky. The next few pages followed a timeline of our life together. Pictures of her first day of school, a dried flower she picked on a walk when she was 5 and insisted we press it forever, a silly drawing of us with big heads and small feet from when she was 6, notes she'd written me over the years, some barely legible in crayon but all cherished. Then came the letters. 12 of them. One for each year of school. I wrote them all from memory, from the heart, one for every milestone I had witnessed. In each one, I reminded her of the quiet moments I held dear. The night she fell off her bike and I sat with her on the curb for an hour while she cried into my shirt. The time I canceled a date just to help her build a diorama of the solar system out of foam balls because she was afraid she wouldn't finish it in time. The night she found out about Nate trying to reconnect through a shallow Facebook message and ran into my room, sobbing that she didn't want a dad who didn't even remember her birthday. I held her that night until dawn. I wrote about all of it. And at the very end, tucked inside a sealed envelope marked "For Your Future," I placed the check. $42,500. It wasn't everything she'd need, but it would cover her first year and then some. It was the fruit of 9 years of overtime, skipped dinners, bargain shopping, and living small. It was in every way my life's work. I wrapped the journal in craft paper and tied it with a ribbon. Simple, unpretentious, just like me. I even added a little card that read, "For every step you've taken, here's the path we walked together. Love always, Uncle Jake." I didn't sleep that night. I sat up in my apartment, the gift on my coffee table, staring at it like it held my soul. Maybe it did. I arrived at Dana's place Christmas afternoon. The living room was chaos. Wrapping paper flying, music blaring, the scent of baked ham mingling with 2 strong cinnamon candles. Dana had outdone herself with decor as usual. The tree looked like something from a catalog. Color-coordinated, artificial, perfect. Her new boyfriend Aaron was there trying too hard to bond with Lily's younger cousins. Everyone was loud, dressed up, laughing. I stood near the doorway holding my gift like it was an artifact. When Lily saw me she smiled, but not the way she used to. It was the polite smile she saved for distant relatives or teachers at parent night. I handed her the gift, heart pounding. "This is for you," I said. She took it, looked at it, and tilted her head. "You wrapped it yourself?" "Yeah," I said. "Just wanted it to feel special." She nodded and moved to the couch. I sat across the room, unable to breathe. She peeled the paper slowly, the way you do when you're not sure if the contents are worth the trouble. When she saw the journal she paused. Flipped it open. A photo slipped out onto her lap. She picked it up, stared at it for a moment, then gave a light chuckle. "Oh wow," she said, turning to Dana. "He made a scrapbook." There was a pause. I saw Dana glance over her wine glass. "Oh honey, that's sweet. Very nostalgic," she said, her tone heavy with the kind of condescension that doesn't need words. Lily kept flipping through it, a tight smile on her face. "There's like letters and old stuff in here. It's nice." I waited for her to reach the envelope, to read the letters, to feel the weight of what I had given her. But instead she closed it halfway through, set it on the table and shrugged. "I mean, it's kind of a lot. Sentimental. Like a therapy journal or something." She laughed, loud enough for the others to join in. "You really made this, Uncle Jake?" I nodded, the room spinning. "Yeah. Every page." Dana chuckled. "Well, you've always been the emotional one. Remember when you cried at that Pixar movie?" More laughter. Someone said, "Ah, like I was a puppy who brought in a chewed-up shoe." I didn't move. I didn't speak. My hands were in my lap, fingers dug into my palms so tight they left crescent-shaped welts. I couldn't feel my face. Couldn't feel anything really except that crushing sense of being completely, utterly misunderstood. I didn't stay long after that. I said I had to get back to feed the cat. I don't even have a cat. As I walked to my truck I heard Lily call out, "Thanks again for the gift," in that sing-song voice people use when they're trying to be polite. I didn't turn around. Didn't wave. Just kept walking. That night I sat in my apartment staring at the walls, the image of her face frozen in my mind. Not the child I used to know, but the girl who had just reduced my entire heart to a punchline. I got up, walked to my desk, opened my laptop and logged into my online banking. The college account was still active, the transfer still scheduled for early January. I hovered over the cancel button for a long time. Then I clicked. I transferred the funds into a private account and closed the scholarship routing number I had arranged. Just like that, it was done. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. It wasn't revenge. It was release. She hadn't seen the gift for what it was, because she hadn't seen me for what I was. Not for a long time. And maybe she never would. Retribution isn't always loud. Sometimes it's not a door slammed or a screaming match or a plate shattered on a kitchen floor. Sometimes it's just silence. A decision made quietly, away from the eyes of those who think they'll always get what they want, no matter how they treat the hands that feed them. That's how it was for me. I didn't call Dana. I didn't send a follow-up message. I didn't explain why the college money never showed up. I just let it unfold. I let the absence speak for itself. And the fallout was far more revealing than any confrontation could have been. The first sign came 2 weeks after Christmas. I was at the garage, half under the belly of a '97 Dodge with a stubborn axle, when my phone buzzed 3 times in a row, 3 missed calls from Dana. I ignored them. She never called unless she needed something and I was done giving. A few hours later a text came through. "Jake, can you call me when you have a second? It's about Lily's financial aid stuff. It's urgent." I stared at the screen, wiped the grease off my hands and put the phone back down. Let them sit in it, I thought. Let them wonder. Later that evening another message. "Hey. I don't know if something went wrong with the transfer, but the college didn't receive the tuition deposit. Lily's panicking. Please tell me this is just a mix-up." It wasn't. I had rerouted the funds to a different account, one I had opened under a new name, not because I was hiding but because I was repurposing the money. See, the week after Christmas I went back to the same bank where I had first set up Lily's fund and I closed it. Then I walked out and sat in my truck for nearly an hour debating what to do next. And I remembered something. There was this boy named Mateo who came to the garage sometimes with his mom. She worked nights at the diner next door and would drop him off after school to wait until her shift ended. He was smart, polite, always reading, always asking questions about engines and gears and physics. One day I asked him what he wanted to be. He said, an engineer. Or a teacher. Or maybe both. I smiled and asked how he planned to get there. He shrugged. My mom says we'll figure it out. I thought about Mateo the entire ride home. Thought about how he reminded me of Lily when she was younger. Curious, bright-eyed, hungry for knowledge. Thought about how life could either open doors for a kid like that or shut them with the quiet cruelty of indifference. That's when I made the decision. I called my lawyer, asked about setting up a private scholarship. Something simple. Quiet. Under a different name so it wouldn't tie back to family politics. It took a few days, but soon, every dollar that had once been earmarked for Lily's education was now legally redirected toward the Quiet Anchor Grant, available exclusively to low-income students with strong academic records and no parental financial backing. I nominated Mateo. The application went through in 2 days. By the time Dana was calling me in a panic, Mateo's acceptance letter, and the full tuition coverage, was already on its way to his home. And I felt at peace. It wasn't spite. It was justice. It was recognition finally landing where it would be honored. But Dana didn't see it that way. 2 nights later she showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door to find her pacing the hallway like a storm barely held together by heels and a stiff blouse. What the hell, Jake? She hissed. Why hasn't the money gone through? I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. What money? Don't do this, she said, voice cracking. You said you were paying for Lily's first year. We counted on that. Did you? I asked deadpan. Because no one mentioned it. No one thanked me. Hell, no one even asked if I was okay taking that burden on. She looked stunned as if the idea of me being upset was brand new. You didn't say anything, she muttered. You just... What? You just pulled the money like some kind of punishment because Lily didn't cry over your scrapbook. It wasn't a scrapbook, I said, voice rising for the first time. It was my life. My heart. It was every moment I spent raising her while you were too busy pretending to be strong and independent. It was everything I gave while getting nothing in return. Dana's face twisted. Oh, come on. He's a teenager, Jake. They're all a little selfish. You're a grown man. You can't seriously be doing this out of hurt feelings. This isn't about feelings, I snapped. It's about respect. And she laughed, Dana. She laughed in front of everyone. And you laughed with her. She went quiet. For a second, just a second, her expression softened. Maybe she remembered. Maybe the image of me sitting there, silent and humiliated, had finally registered. But it didn't last. So you're really going to sabotage her future because your ego took a hit? She whispered. No, I said calmly. I'm redirecting my support to someone who sees its value. That's when I told her about Mateo. About the scholarship. About the check that would now cover another kid's dreams. She didn't take it well. He called me cruel. Said I was abandoning Lily when she needed me most. Said I was turning my back on my own blood. I didn't argue. I just held the door open and waited for her to leave. You're going to regret this, she spat as she walked out. One day she'll hate you for it. I closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling the kind of breath that feels like a decade leaving your lungs. Maybe she would hate me. Maybe she already did. But for the first time in years I wasn't running on empty. I had made a choice, not out of revenge but out of self-respect. And somehow that felt like the most powerful kind of love there was. Love that says, I will give you the world, but only if you can hold it with care. And if you drop it, laugh at it, toss it aside like it meant nothing, then no, you don't get to keep it. Because love is not a doormat. And I would not be walked on again. Fallout doesn't happen all at once, it seeps. It drips into the cracks of relationships like water through a ceiling, slow and relentless until everything beneath starts to rot. That's what happened after Dana stormed out of my apartment. I expected a storm, but what followed wasn't thunder. It was a cold, drawn-out silence. For days no one called. No one showed up. I thought maybe that was it, that I had finally been erased from their narrative. Part of me felt a dull ache at that, but a deeper part felt relief. I had nothing left to explain. I had spoken with my actions. I had chosen to stop being invisible by stepping all the way out. But then came the text. Not from Dana. Not from some cousin trying to mediate. From Lily. 3 days after Dana's visit, I opened my phone to a message that read, "Did you cancel my college fund?" That was it. No hi. No, hope you're okay. No sign she understood what had led to any of this. Just accusation. I stared at it for a long time. Then I put the phone down and went for a walk. I walked past the auto shop, past the diner where I'd sat with her after dance recitals, past the school where I had once waited 2 hours in the rain to give her a ride home because Dana forgot. And I thought, she really doesn't know. He doesn't know what I gave. He doesn't know what I withheld. She doesn't know who I was in her story because she never read the pages I left for her. When I got back home, I still hadn't answered. That night, Dana called again. I let it ring. Then she called from a different number. I answered. "You need to talk to her," she said, skipping pleasantries. "She's devastated." I didn't respond. "Jake, she cried all night," she added, her voice thin. She said she found the check. It fell out when she was showing the journal to her friends. She didn't even know it was in there until after. That stopped me. "She what?" "She didn't see the check," Dana repeated. "She thought it was just a sentimental thing. She didn't know." "She laughed at it, Dana," I said, voice cracking. "She called it therapy homework. She passed it around like it was a joke." "She didn't mean to," Dana said. "She's just a kid. She didn't know what was in it. You have to understand." "No," I interrupted. "No more excuses. She's 17. She's old enough to know when she's hurting someone. She's old enough to read a note and feel the weight of what it means. I poured everything into that gift and she humiliated me. It wasn't about the check. It was about being reduced to nothing in front of the people I once considered family." "So what now?" she asked quietly. "You're just cutting her off?" I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, I didn't know. I had made my choice out of a need to reclaim my dignity. But I wasn't cruel. I hadn't set out to punish a child. I had just finally run out of places to put the pain. "She needs to learn," I finally said. "What?" Dana snapped. "She needs to suffer to learn a lesson?" "She needs to understand the cost of indifference," I replied. "She needs to know that people who love you don't owe you forever." Dana scoffed. "You're unbelievable. After everything you did for her, you want her to feel worthless now." "No," I said, exhaling hard. "I want her to feel the absence of something that was never truly valued. Because sometimes that's the only way people learn to appreciate it." She hung up. And then the silence truly began. A week passed. Then I saw photos online of Lily meeting with college advisors, talking about financial options, launching a GoFundMe that got maybe $300 in 3 weeks. I watched from a distance, not because I wanted to gloat, but because I needed to know if this would wake her up. And eventually something shifted. One night, another message from Lily. "Can I come over?" I hesitated, then replied, "If you're coming to yell, don't." Her response came 5 minutes later. "I'm not." She showed up at my apartment the next day. No makeup. No designer shoes. Just jeans, a sweatshirt, and puffy eyes. She looked like a ghost of the girl I had raised. The one who used to sit in my lap at bedtime and ask, "Do you think stars get lonely?" I let her in. We sat in silence for a long time. Then she took the journal out of her bag, creased now with more pages dog-eared than before. "I read it," she whispered. "All of it." I waited. "I didn't know," she added. "I didn't realize how much you were there. I didn't remember some of the things you wrote about. But when I read it, it all came back. I remembered your laugh. The way you used to carry me on your shoulders. The lunch notes. I didn't know how much you had done." I felt my chest tighten. "Why didn't you say anything?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Why didn't you tell me you were paying for college?" "Because I didn't want thanks," I said. "I wanted to believe that what I was doing would speak for itself. That one day you'd look back and understand without me having to point at it and say, 'Look, I did that for you.'" Tears welled in her eyes. "I messed up." "Yes," I said gently. "You did." "Do you hate me?" she asked so quietly I almost didn't hear it. "No," I said. "I could never hate you. But I had to choose myself, Lily. I had to stop giving to people who didn't see me." She nodded slowly, wiping her face. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry." And for the first time in a long time it felt real. Not a performance. Not an apology to make the problem go away. but an acknowledgement. A moment of truth. We didn't hug. We didn't fix everything. But something changed in that room. A shift. A fracture beginning to heal. The fallout was still there, lingering in the air. But maybe, just maybe, something new was beginning to grow from the rubble. You don't become invisible overnight. It happens slowly, like dust settling on furniture in a room that no one visits anymore. I used to think that invisibility was something reserved for the shy, the overlooked, the ones who never made enough noise to be noticed. But over time I learned that invisibility can come for anyone, even those who show up every day, who give until they're hollow, who love without applause. My life, for the most part, had always been a series of silent sacrifices. Not because I thought they made me noble, but because I had been raised in the shadows. Long before Lily was born, long before I ever learned to spell the word responsibility, I had been taught what it meant to be secondary. My parents, God rest them, were not cruel, but they were deeply human, and like many flawed people, they had favorites. Dana was the golden child. The loud one. The beautiful one. The one who won spelling bees and joined debate teams and brought home trophies that got their own shelf in the living room. I was the quiet kid with greasy hands, more comfortable with engines than equations, more likely to be found fixing the neighbor's lawnmower than studying for a math test. They never said it outright, but the message was clear. Dana was going somewhere. I was staying here. I remember one Christmas when I was about 12. Dana had begged for this dollhouse from a magazine, 3 stories tall with working lights and tiny furniture. It must have cost a fortune, but on Christmas morning, there it was under the tree, wrapped in silver paper with a giant red bow. She squealed, cried, threw her arms around our dad. I remember clapping for her, genuinely happy. Then I looked for my name. My gift was a wrench set. Useful. Practical. You'll need these someday, buddy, my dad said with a nod. And I did. I used those wrenches until the foam lining of the case wore thin and the handles molded to my grip. But even then I felt the weight of that moment, the knowledge that my joy was tied to utility while Dana's was tied to dreams. That dynamic never changed. When she got into college, there were parties, balloons, speeches. When I got my mechanic certification, Mom said, "That's great, honey. Now you can always have a job to fall back on." A job to fall back on. That was me. The fallback. The plan B. So I stayed small. I stayed quiet. I learned to celebrate others without expecting to be celebrated. I became a master of the background, a fixer of things, a supporter of dreams that weren't mine. And when Lily came along, I thought maybe, just maybe, that would change. That I could finally be someone's first choice. I loved her instantly. Not in the way people toss the word around like it's confetti, but deeply, completely, as if she were the very reason I had been walking through all those years of darkness. Holding her for the first time, feeling her tiny hand curl around my pinky, I remember thinking, this is what light feels like. For a while that light kept me warm. She needed me. She wanted me. She'd cry if I left the room, cling to my shirt, call for me in the night. And in those moments I let myself believe I had stepped out of the shadows. That maybe at last I was being seen. But shadows are persistent. And the world has a way of pushing you back into them, especially when you don't fit its definitions of success, power, or status. Dana began to rise again, finding her footing, finding her voice, finding new people to orbit around. And I started to disappear. First from conversations, then from decisions, then from memory. When Lily turned 7, she had a birthday party at a bowling alley. I had helped pay for it, baked the cake, wrapped the favors. But when they took the group photo, I was in the back, cut off by the edge of the frame. I wasn't asked to be in the center. I wasn't even tagged when the photo went online. And when someone asked, "Who's the guy next to Dana?" she replied, "Oh, just my brother." My brother. I told myself it didn't matter. That what mattered was showing up. Being reliable. Being the person people could count on when things fell apart. But every time I faded into the background, something in me chipped away. It wasn't resentment at first, just sorrow. A quiet ache. Like watching someone slowly erase the part of a photograph where your face used to be. When Lily hit her teenage years and really began to drift, that ache turned into something deeper, something more desperate. I found myself clinging to moments, trying to recapture old connections through forced conversations, gifts that missed the mark, jokes that fell flat. He tolerated me. That was the best way to put it. Tolerated. And I let her. Because I didn't know how to ask for more without sounding needy. I didn't know how to say, "I'm vanishing and it's killing me." and so I stayed in the shadows. Until that Christmas. That journal was my flare in the dark. My final attempt to say, look at me. Remember me. I was here. And when it failed, when they laughed, I felt something die. Not just the hope that I'd ever be fully seen by them, but the version of me who had lived for that hope. That man, the one who showed up without question, who gave without being asked, who loved without limits, he began to fade. In his place, someone quieter rose. Someone who still cared but not blindly. Someone who had learned that visibility isn't something you earn through suffering. It's something you deserve by virtue of existing. And if the people closest to you can't offer that, you have every right to walk away. I don't regret loving Lily. I never could. But I do regret not loving myself enough to demand better sooner. I do regret spending years in the shadows waiting for a spotlight that was never going to turn my way. Because now I see that light isn't given, it's claimed. And sometimes, claiming your own light means stepping out of the roles others have written for you and rewriting the story on your own terms. That's what I began to do in the months that followed. Quietly. Fully. But for the first time with clarity. Some lessons come wrapped in pain, disguised as heartbreak or betrayal, and we accept them because they feel so absolute, so sharp and final, that we assume they must be true. I lived by a few of those lessons for years. Lessons like being needed is the same as being loved, or, if you just keep giving, eventually someone will notice. I believed that quiet loyalty was a virtue, that sacrifice was a form of currency, that love was proven best in silence. But in the months that followed the fallout with Dana and Lily, I began to see how many of those lessons were wrong, how they were not truths but survival tactics I had adopted from years of being overlooked. They weren't wisdom. They were wounds. The silence between us didn't last forever. After Lily came to my apartment and apologized, really apologized, I felt something shift. Not healed, not fixed, but shifted. A door cracked open just wide enough to let air back into a room that had suffocated in resentment. But that didn't mean everything was okay. That didn't mean trust was restored. It just meant we had started a new chapter, one written with honesty instead of obligation. What I didn't expect was how hard it would be to unlearn everything I thought I knew about love. Because even as Lily tried to reconnect, sending occasional messages, stopping by with coffee, asking for help with applications, I found myself hesitant, even suspicious. Not because I thought she was manipulating me, but because I had trained myself so deeply to equate her attention with eventual pain. Every kindness felt like a setup. Every smile made me wonder if another laugh was waiting around the corner. That's when I realized, the damage wasn't just in what they did, it was in what I let myself believe for so long. I had taught myself to expect less. I had taught myself that my role in life was to give without receiving, love without being seen, serve without being thanked. And as noble as that might sound on the surface, it was actually a form of self-erasure. I had made myself small so others could feel big. I had swallowed my needs so others could shine. And I had done it with a smile, convinced that love demanded nothing in return. But love, real love, isn't a one-way street. It's not something you keep pouring out until you're empty and alone. Real love sees you. Real love sits with you. Real love notices when you're tired, when you're breaking, when you're shrinking into yourself. And real love doesn't let you do that. In those early days after redirecting Lily's college fund, I doubted myself constantly. Mateo's scholarship went through, and his mother called me in tears, unable to believe that a stranger had invested in her son's future. I met with them quietly once at a diner where she worked. He told me about his plans to study mechanical engineering and eventually teach underserved kids. I listened, nodded, encouraged. And when I got back to my truck, I wept. Not because I regretted giving him the money, but because he looked at me with the kind of gratitude I had been craving for years. Not praise. Not worship. Just recognition. A simple, steady awareness that I had done something good and that it mattered. That's when I understood the difference. Giving isn't supposed to cost you your sense of self. It's supposed to be an extension of it. A gift, not a depletion. And for the first time I saw clearly how much I had unlearned. I stopped measuring my worth by how much I could endure. I stopped confusing silence for strength. I stopped chasing acknowledgement from people who had proven time and time again that they only saw me when it was convenient. I started drawing boundaries, not with anger but with purpose. I didn't attend every family dinner. I didn't answer every call. I didn't jump to fix every problem. When Dana tried to guilt me, I let her voice hit the voicemail. When Lily asked for help, I asked what she needed, not just from me but from herself. I made her show up in the conversation, not just as a recipient but as a participant. And slowly she did. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward silences, tense pauses, moments when old habits tried to sneak back in. But we kept showing up. We kept trying. One day, Lily told me about a classmate of hers who had been kicked out by her parents for getting pregnant. The girl was couchsurfing, working part-time and still trying to graduate. Lily said, "I told her about what you did for Matteo. I didn't say your name but," she cried. She said it gave her hope that people like you still exist. That moment hit me in a way I didn't expect. Not because I wanted credit, but because Lily saw it. She saw me. Maybe not fully. Maybe not in all the ways I had once craved. But she saw enough to speak about it with reverence instead of ridicule. That was more than I ever thought I'd get. And in that moment I felt something else. Freedom. Not the kind that comes from cutting ties, but the kind that comes from finally standing in your truth. I didn't need to prove my worth anymore. I didn't need to buy my place in someone's life. I had given. I had learned. And now I was choosing what came next, not based on guilt but on growth. The hardest part of all this wasn't being hurt. It was realizing how long I had lived with the belief that hurt was just part of the deal. That to be close to people you had to accept being forgotten. That to love someone you had to accept being overlooked. But that was the lesson I had finally unlearned. And in its place I began to build something new. Not louder. Not flashier. Just sturdier. Healthier. More honest. I still work at the garage. I still live in my modest apartment. I still eat cereal for dinner more nights than I care to admit. But my life no longer feels small. Because now it belongs to me. There's a moment in every man's life when he finally understands that being a father has nothing to do with biology. It isn't about genetics or last names or the hospital forms you signed. It's about presence. It's about showing up when no one else does. About staying when it's inconvenient. About loving with no guarantee that love will be returned. I had spent most of my life trying to prove I could be that kind of man for someone. For Lily. But when I stepped away from that role, when I stopped grasping at the idea of being her father or even her hero, I realized something surprising. I already was. Not just for Lily. But for others too. And most importantly, for myself. The first time Matteo called me Mr. Jake, I laughed. "You don't have to call me that," I said. "Just Jake is fine." He shrugged. "My mom said I should respect the man who believed in me before anyone else did." That line landed like a punch to the chest. I remembered all the times Lily had looked through me, all the ways Dana had rewritten the story to exclude me. And here was a teenager I barely knew, placing me gently into a space I had always longed to inhabit. Someone worthy of respect not because I demanded it but because I earned it. Matteo wasn't perfect. He had his moods, his struggles. There were days he didn't text back, weeks when his grades dipped, moments when he questioned whether he belonged in college at all. But every time he faltered, he showed up. And every time he showed up, I saw a younger version of myself, trying to find his place in a world that didn't hand out second chances easily. I didn't smother him. I didn't try to fix everything. I just showed up quietly, steadily in the ways I had learned how. We had weekly lunches, usually burgers or tacos, nothing fancy. He'd talk about his professors, his dorm roommate, the pressure of being the first in his family to go to college. Sometimes he just vented. Sometimes we sat in silence. But every moment felt like a thread connecting us in a way I hadn't expected. There was one day, late fall, leaves starting to turn, that Matteo showed up at the garage with a flat tire and a look of total defeat. "Rough day?" I asked. "Midterms," he said. "And my girlfriend dumped me." I didn't say much. Just handed him a rag and showed him how to jack up the car. We worked side by side, grease under our nails, hands moving in rhythm. And when we were done, he turned to me and said, "You know, I used to think fatherhood was about lectures and rules and yelling. But this is what it should be. Just this." It was such a simple statement, but it stayed with me. Because in that moment, I realized I had become the man I'd always hoped to be. Not in the eyes of my family but in the quiet, honest eyes of someone who truly needed me. And that's when I understood. Fatherhood isn't a position you hold. It's a role you grow into. It's not about shaping someone into your image. It's about standing beside them as they discover who they already are. Over time, Matteo began calling more. He asked for advice about internships, about how to fix a leaky faucet in his dorm, about whether to stay in his major or switch to teaching. I never gave him answers. I just asked the right questions. Encouraged him to trust himself. Cheered him on when he got things right and sat with him when he didn't. I wasn't trying to replace a father he never had. I was simply being the kind of man I wished had stood beside me when I was his age. And in doing that, I realized I was healing something in myself too. The part of me that had always felt second best. The part of me that thought I had to earn love by disappearing behind it. The part of me that had given everything to a family that couldn't see past their own reflection. Matteo saw me. Not as a savior. Not as a solution. Just as a man doing his best. And in that space I finally began to see myself too. Meanwhile, Lily and I continued to rebuild. Slowly. Cautiously. She didn't ask about Matteo at first. I didn't volunteer the information. I needed her to want the relationship, not out of curiosity but out of care. And eventually she did. One day she asked if I still kept in touch with the boy I had helped. I nodded. His name's Matteo, I said. He's doing great. Smart kid. Reminds me of someone I used to know. She smiled. Not the smile of the girl who used to dance on my boots, but the smile of a young woman trying to make peace with the man she had once hurt. I'm glad you helped him, she said. I think he needed it more than I did. That took me by surprise. I think, she added, sometimes I thought your love would just always be there no matter what. Like, I didn't have to earn it. I just assumed. You don't have to earn love, I said gently. But you do have to respect it. She nodded. I'm still learning how. Me too, I replied. And we sat there, two people with 1,000 unspoken apologies between us, finally learning how to say the ones that mattered. Fatherhood had always been complicated for me. Not just because I wasn't a biological dad, but because I had spent so long trying to prove I could be. But now I saw it differently. I didn't need the title. I didn't need the cards or the public praise. I just needed the moments. The burgers with Matteo. The quiet texts from Lily. The steady rhythm of a life built not on performance but on presence. That's the kind of father I became. Not the kind who walks a child down the aisle or gives away the bride. But the kind who shows up at a kid's dorm with a toolbox when the heater breaks. The kind who answers calls at 11 p.m. because someone's scared they failed a test. The kind who isn't in the family photos, but whose fingerprints are on every page of someone's success. I once thought I had to be everything to someone to be worth anything. Now I know that being exactly who I am to exactly the right people is more than enough. Healing doesn't come with a grand finale. It doesn't announce itself like a trumpet at a parade or crash through the door like a late guest with flowers and apologies. It comes in pieces. Quiet ones. Small, barely noticeable shifts in the way people look at each other, talk to each other, choose each other again. That's what it was like with Lily, healing in whispers, not declarations. At first we texted once a week. Then twice. Then she started sending me photos. Of her meals, her notes, her dog-eared college textbooks. Little things. Things that didn't say, I love you, or, I'm sorry, but carried those words in the spaces between. One afternoon she called. Just called. No warning. No crisis. I was elbow-deep in engine grease, but I answered anyway, wiping my hands on a rag. Hey, she said, a little shy. What's up? Nothing really. Just wanted to talk. I got an A on my English paper. I paused, then smiled. That's great, kid. He paused too. Then said, I knew you'd be proud. I wanted you to be the first to know. It was such a simple moment, but it landed like a stone dropped into still water. A ripple that spread through everything I had come to believe about our relationship. For so long I had been invisible in her victories. Now I was being invited back into them. That call became a new ritual. Weekly. Sometimes about grades. Sometimes about nothing. She'd ask about Matteo. Ask if I was still working at the garage. She'd recommend books. I'd recommend tools. It was awkward at times. Two people learning how to be in each other's lives again without tripping over the wreckage of the past. But we kept showing up. And the cracks in the ice began to widen. One day she asked if she could stop by. I'll bring takeout, she said. Your favorite. Those awful spicy noodles you pretend aren't that spicy. They're not that spicy, I said laughing. She rolled her eyes. You always say that. And just like that, we were back in the familiar rhythm of teasing and warmth that used to thread between us like an unspoken language. When she arrived, the journal was in her bag. She pulled it out gently and placed it on the coffee table like it was sacred. I read it again, she said. Cover to cover. It hits different now. I didn't say anything. Just nodded. There was this part, she continued, flipping to a dog-eared page, where you wrote about the time I got lost at the fair and you found me crying behind the cotton candy stand. I forgot that happened. I never did, I said. You were 5. You kept saying, I knew you'd come back. Her eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry I didn't see it then. I'm sorry I forgot so much. You were a kid, I said softly. It wasn't your job to remember. It was mine to hold those memories until you were ready to come back to them. She nodded slowly, her hands tracing the leather edges of the journal. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I never found the check, she said. If I never opened the last page. You would have been okay, I said. Maybe. But I would have lost this. She looked around the room, not at the walls or the furniture but at me. I would have lost you. And I think that would have been worse. That moment felt like a homecoming. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a gentle landing after a long, turbulent flight. For years I had lived with the ache of being forgotten. Now for the first time I felt remembered. Not just for what I had given but for who I was. And it was in that recognition that the ice between us truly began to thaw. It didn't happen all at once. There were still sharp edges. Still hesitations. Dana hadn't reached out since our last conversation. I hadn't pushed. Some bridges need to burn to light the path forward. But Lily and I, our bridge was being rebuilt. Board by board. Trust by trust. One evening she said something that stayed with me. We were eating on the couch, watching one of those cheesy cooking shows where people yell about soufflés, and she turned to me and asked, Do you think Mateo ever wonders why you chose him? I shrugged. Maybe. Why did you? I thought for a second. Because he reminded me of someone who used to dream out loud. Someone who used to think the world was full of possibility. I saw that in him. And I didn't want him to lose it. She didn't speak for a while. Then she whispered, I think I lost it for a while. That dreaming thing. Maybe, I said. But it's not gone. Just buried. Under a lot of noise. You'll find it again. Thanks to you, she said. Not because of me, I replied. Because you're choosing to look. And that's when I realized she wasn't a little girl anymore. She wasn't the wide-eyed kid who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms or draw stick figures of us holding hands. She was a young woman making her own choices, her own mistakes, and now, her own amends. And I had a choice to keep holding her to the girl she was. Or to meet her where she was now. I chose the latter. Because fatherhood, real fatherhood, isn't about control. It's about faith. It's about believing in who someone is becoming even when they've let you down. Especially when they've let you down. That night as she left, she hugged me, not a quick pat on the back hug but a real one. The kind where you hold on just a little longer because the space between you has finally started to feel safe again. And for the first time in years I didn't feel like I was reaching into the past. I was holding the present. And maybe, even the future. Some stories don't end where you think they will. They unfold slowly in spaces you once thought were abandoned, in hearts you feared had closed for good. Rebuilding isn't about erasing the past. It's about setting a new table where everyone has to bring more than their appetite. Where they have to bring humility, truth, and the willingness to stay. And that's exactly what happened the night Lily invited me to dinner. It wasn't Thanksgiving or Christmas. It wasn't some grand occasion meant to fix everything with a single evening. It was just an ordinary Sunday. She had called a few days earlier, her voice laced with nerves and something that felt almost like hope. I'm making dinner. I'd really like you to come. Just you and me, and Mom. That last part landed with a thud in my chest. I hadn't seen Dana since she stormed out of my apartment months ago. Since she accused me of betrayal. Since she told me I'd regret everything. I didn't respond right away. Lily filled the silence. She's been different. Quieter. She knows she crossed a line. I'm not asking you to forgive her. Just be open. I told her I'd think about it. And for 3 days I did. I paced my living room. I played out every possible version of the evening. From awkward silence to screaming matches. But in the end one thought anchored me. If I believed people could change, if I believed Lily could grow and come back to me, didn't I owe Dana the chance to try? So I said yes. The house looked different when I arrived. It wasn't just the decor, though the cluttered walls and loud color schemes had been toned down. It was the energy. Softer. Less performative. Lily answered the door with an apron on and flour dust in her hair. "You came," she said, and for the first time, it felt like the words didn't carry expectation, just genuine gratitude. Dana was in the kitchen stirring something on the stove. When she turned and saw me, she didn't offer a forced smile or a fake greeting. She just looked at me, really looked, and said, "Jake." I nodded. "Dana." We didn't hug. We didn't dive into apologies. We just existed in the same space for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. And somehow that was enough. Dinner was simple. Pasta, salad, garlic bread. Nothing fancy. No speeches. Just plates passed hand to hand, stories shared between bites, awkward laughter that eventually turned into the real kind. For the first half hour we mostly talked about safe things. Mateo's scholarship. Lily's classes. The garage. But as dessert came, apple pie, slightly burned crust, we sat in a quieter moment and Dana cleared her throat. "I owe you an apology," she said. My fork froze. She looked down at her plate, then back at me. "Not just for Christmas. For a lot of things. I spent a lot of years pretending I was doing it all on my own. But I wasn't. You were there. Every step. And I treated that like it was your obligation instead of a choice." I stayed quiet. She continued. "You deserved better from me. From both of us. And I don't expect you to forget, but I am asking for a chance to do things differently." The room was still. Lily's eyes were glassy. Mine too, though I kept blinking it away. "Thank you," I said finally. "That means more than you know." She nodded. "I've been in therapy. Started after New Year's. Figured, if Lily could grow, I needed to catch up. It wasn't a full repair. But it was a first brick. And I was willing to build as long as the bricks kept coming from a place of truth." After dinner, Lily pulled out the journal again. "I want to read you something," she said. She opened to the letter I had written for her senior year. One I had poured my soul into, knowing it might be the last one she ever read. "It says," she began, her voice shaky, "if this is the year you leave, just know that wherever you go, my love goes with you. I've never been good at asking for space at the table. But I hope someday you'll make room for me, not out of duty but out of love." She looked up. "There's room now. Always." And that's when I broke. Not dramatically. Just quietly. A single tear down my cheek as I nodded and whispered, "Thank you." The table had been rebuilt, not with wood and nails but with vulnerability. With grace. With the kind of love that doesn't erase mistakes but folds them into the foundation. We finished the night with tea and stories from years we had almost forgotten. Dana admitted she missed the nights when we used to play cards while Lily slept on the couch. Lily said she found one of the lunch notes I'd written her tucked in an old book, and it made her cry for a full hour. And I shared a memory I hadn't spoken of in years. Of Lily, 5 years old, pretending to drive my truck, saying, "When I'm big, I want to be just like you." It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that made it more than enough. As I drove home that night, the air felt lighter. The city quieter. And my heart, once so heavy with loss, felt like it had made room for something new. Something resilient. Something earned. I didn't know what would come next. I didn't know if Dana and I would ever be siblings in the way we once were. I didn't know if Lily's gratitude would hold through the storms still ahead. But I knew this. I had a place at the table again. Not because I demanded it. Not because I sacrificed for it. But because I was finally seen. And this time they had built it with me in mind. Legacies don't always come with statues or headlines or last names etched on brass plaques. Sometimes the most enduring legacies are the quiet ones. The ones built in the margins, in acts of devotion that no one sees, in the love given without condition, and in the silence that says, "I was here and I mattered." I think about that often now, especially in the still moments, when the garage is closed and the lights are off, when the city sleeps and I'm left with my thoughts, when there's no noise, no drama, just me and the quiet rhythm of a life lived on my own terms. I never got the traditional markers of a father's legacy. No family photo wall. No Father's Day trophies. No proud to call him dad speeches. But I got something else. I got a letter. It came in the mail 2 weeks after that dinner at Lily's house. It was from Mateo. Dear Mr. Jake, it began. I don't know how to put into words what your support has meant to me. I'm learning that the people who change your life the most aren't the ones who shout the loudest. They're the ones who sit beside you when it's hard, who tell you, you've got this, even when the world says otherwise. You gave me more than a scholarship. You gave me belief. And I promise I'll carry that forward. One day, I hope I can be someone's quiet anchor just like you were for me. I sat with that letter for hours. Reread it a dozen times. And each time something inside me settled, like a puzzle piece sliding into place after years of forcing the wrong fits. It was never about recognition. It was about impact. And I had made one. Not just on Mateo. Not just on Lily. But on myself. In learning to give with intention instead of desperation, I had discovered something I never expected. Peace. The kind that doesn't rely on applause or validation. The kind that grows quietly, patiently in the spaces where pain used to live. Lily and I talk often now. She updates me on her classes, her job prospects, the volunteer work she started doing with kids from low-income neighborhoods. I want to help kids who don't have an Uncle Jake, she told me once. It feels right. I couldn't speak after that. Just nodded. Because in that moment I saw it. My legacy living through her, not because she owed me but because she had learned. She had grown. And she had chosen to carry it forward. Dana and I are cordial. Civil. There's warmth now, but it's cautious, like sunlight through stained glass. Filtered, fractured, but still light. I don't need her to become the sister she never was. I just need her to be honest, and lately she has been. We'll never be the same, but we don't have to be broken. And that's enough. I still keep the journal. Not because I need it to remember, but because it reminds me of the man I became when no one was watching. Sometimes when the ache comes back, when I start to wonder if any of it really mattered, I open to the last page. The one I wrote the day after Christmas before I ever decided to take the money back. It's a note to myself. You gave. You stayed. You loved. And that is enough. I didn't know then how much I'd need those words. I didn't know they would become a mantra, a map back to myself. But they did. And they still do. People sometimes ask if I regret it. Giving so much, letting myself be hurt, choosing a silent retribution instead of a public war. And I tell them the truth. I don't regret loving Lily. I don't regret helping Mateo. I don't regret staying true to who I was, even when no one noticed. Because my legacy isn't in what I lost. It's in what I gave. And what I gave, time, care, belief, became something bigger than me. It became change. And that, more than anything, is what I hope people remember. Not my name. Not my face. Just the feeling. The quiet presence. The gentle force that held people steady when the world shook. That's the kind of man I wanted to be. And maybe, just maybe, I was. The funny thing about silence is that it doesn't mean absence. Sometimes it means reverence. Sometimes it means the echo of something sacred that doesn't need noise to matter. That's the legacy I leave behind. Not loud, but lasting.